So I've already done a video featuring this DNT The One versus the Arken EP5 in the exact same magnification range. To sum up that video in a very short, sweet note with a bow on top, they are nearly identical. That is because they are the exact same base optic. If you want to find out more between this optic and that, go watch that video. I will link it in the description below. But we will be taking a close head-to-head look between those two optics at large bore. So if you're interested in that and still want to watch this video, just give it a little bit of time. We'll get there pretty soon. Because I've already covered this scope pretty in-depthly, I'm going to skim through this to just give you the highlight reels. As far as what comes inside the box, it's a pretty standard affair. You have the scope, a bikini cover, a sunshade, and a couple of doodads here and there, a couple minor tools, and a sticker or two. That's about it. As far as the price point, right now online, as of October 3rd, they're in like the mid 600s, but I have seen them pretty standardized in like the mid to low 700s. So that price is going to vary a little bit. As far as the length, it's 16 inches. It weighs 42 ounces. The field of view is 16.6 feet to 3.3 feet with an eye relief of 3.5 inches and a minimum side parallax of 25 yards, as well as 30 mils of total elevation gain, which across the board is actually very average to slightly above. It's quite good. But that's enough of a rundown of the specs. Let's take a look at the reticle. And I have to say, I prefer this over the EP5. Not only is the reticle a little bit easier and a little bit finer at the center for properly holding if you're dialing for elevation, but the illumination is much, much brighter. With the Arken, it's just the center crosshair. With this, it's the entire drop, and it just fills itself out very nicely. It's also significantly brighter than what is seen with the EP5, so if you're more interested in illumination, go with this for sure. I must say I like this reticle. It's easy to use throughout the entire magnification range, the illumination is exceptional, and it's easy to read and figure out where your holds are. A+ DNT. The turrets sound and feel really solid on this scope, and the zero stop is pretty good. Not the best, but far from the worst. There are no locks on this, so that large windage turret off to the right is, well, free and clear to spin how it likes. I love seeing a reticle line up to my tracking target perfectly, especially when it's more of a precision-focused optic like this The One. I'm just going to call it DNT from now on. That makes it just a little bit easier to roll off the tongue. On my tracking test, the reticle lines up flawlessly. Adjusting the side parallax, no issues. Adjusting magnification, no issues. And with tracking this thing, I go up 13 plus mils from this current zero, and it is absolutely flawless. When I say that this was one of the best tracking performances I've seen, I'm not BSing you. It's one of the best tracking performances I've seen. A+ DNT. Focusing on my precision eye chart with a color chart and part of my precision tracking target at about 81 yards in my backyard. Conditions were pretty good, slightly overcast, but very sunny, very warm. This is shot in the middle of the summer. The reticle at minimum magnification here looks really good. You could still make up a lot of the fine print in the middle, so this way you could still use it at the minimum magnification. If you're worried about not being able to see the reticle, don't worry. The illumination is so good, you can absolutely see this during the day. Will you see it in direct sunlight? Probably not. We are looking at a more shadowed area because the treetops, the canopy is very thick. But as I pan across my backyard, you could see that the illumination holds its own very well, even in the blown out portions, because the camera settings, to be able to see where we're looking, you couldn't really see anywhere else. Very solid performance optically as far as how it handles bright lights, and the reticle is just chef's kiss, wonderful. Paying closer attention now to my targets as I slowly increase the magnification, let's see how far down on that eye chart we could read. Illumination still on full is absolutely wonderful. There is a bit of a softening and a darkening to the outside edge. You saw that earlier when we were just paying attention to the reticle. But out here in the real world environment, you will notice it in darker environments. In really bright sunny environments, it's not as bad, but it is something to note. At least the center still remains neutral as far as its color balance goes and its brightness goes. There's no real loss of anything towards the center. I'd say about half of the image. But the outside edge does start to get a bit of a brown note to it. It just softens the image up just a little bit and darkens it just a tad. Not the end of the world. 35x is a lot of magnification, and to be able to even consider using that in most environments is impressive enough as is. Backing out the magnification slightly to 30x does improve that, and as we step it down lower and lower throughout the magnification range, it just improves. So while the scope does have 35x capacity, it's going to be reserved for the most perfect of conditions unless you're shooting in an environment or a situation where you don't mind if it gets a little bit darker or a little bit dimmer at the outside edge, like F-class shooting, for example. If you're out in the field hunting, that's a different story. But shooting on paper targets at a slow, steady pace, let's piggyback that into directly checking the low light performance of this thing. Because we know that at 35x it already starts to darken the image. In brighter environments, when we get to a darker environment like this, very overcast, slightly raining, looking deep into the shadowy area of my backyard, as we increase the magnification, it should get progressively worse, and it should be more noticeable to our eye. Already the ambient light looking through this thing does look a little bit on the dimmer side. It does not look as bright as when we see it through the naked eye, or in this case, the naked camera with no optic in front. But let's see how noticeable it'll be when we increase the magnification. First and foremost, though, a real quick illumination check, and it is still wonderful. Absolutely fantastic illumination on this thing. I couldn't ask for much more for a high-powered variable optic like this, and I don't think you would too. I did have a bit of an issue with the illumination knob on this, but it turned out it was just the battery. The battery wasn't seated in there properly. I didn't have the battery compartment tightened down enough, so keep that in mind, folks, to, double check your stuff. At 35x, at the same target we looked at earlier, you can see that not only do we lose a lot of the brightness in the outside edge, but we also lose some sharpness as well. This is as good as I could get it, and it doesn't look anywhere near as sharp or as clear to my eye as what we saw earlier. So the low light performance of the scope is not the best, but it gets substantially worse the higher you go. So if you do plan on using this in lower light environments, just keep it below like 20x and you shouldn't really have much of an issue. Moving on to the extended range portion. This is where the scope was designed to be. Large distances, open fields, bright conditions. Even as bright and as sunny as it is, the illumination is still visible out here. It's so good. How come more manufacturers can't do this? I don't get it. It doesn't even bloom out when you're in too dark of an environment, when you have the illumination too bright. Some scopes will do that. This doesn't even do that. So, yeah, the illumination on this thing is absolutely fantastic, and the reticle is, I feel, one of the better precision-focused reticles out there. We're going to go from 360 yards out to 1,000 and then add some elevation. I'm first going to set the side parallax to the rough distance of around 360 yards before I increase the magnification nice and slowly. With all that being said, let's increase the magnification first to 20x and dwell here for a little bit to take in just how beautiful this optic looks at 20x. The center part of the image is nice and sharp and clear, and just look at all the steel work on that power tower. It looks really solid. No chromatic aberration to speak of, no real loss of sharpness or clarity. At 30x, you could see the darkening to the outside edge that I had mentioned since the very beginning, and it does become more apparent as we slowly tick it up to 35x. Beyond that darkening to the image, everything else still looks really solid. The center is still bright, clear, and sharp, and the outside edge does lose a little bit, but where it matters most is going to be more or less in the center, and it's pretty damn good. Side parallax is also pretty solid, very accurate to where it needed to be for us to get the best possible looking image, and this is as good as you can expect it to look at 360 yards. Shifting our attention now to the 1,000-yard solar panel at 30x, you can see Everything looks pretty solid, but we still have a few X more to go. So let's crank it up and bring it to its absolute maximum. Now, weather conditions were sensational. It was very bright, sunny, clear day, low humidity, a little bit of wind. Basically as good of conditions as you could expect to do any sort of long distance shooting or ranging with an optic, whether it be a rifle scope, a telescope, binoculars, whatever. It's as good as you could possibly get it. Increasing the elevation up 10 plus mils, you could see that we do have the darkening to the image at 6 o'clock being a little bit more apparent, but now the top half of the hemisphere also looks like it's getting just a blanket statement of being a little bit darker. I try to adjust the camera a little bit, and you can see that we do fix most of that, bring the camera up just a touch, meaning that your exit pupil is going to shift on you when you're perfectly behind it. The image does look a little bit softer. I try to dial it out as much as I can. Ultimately, the end result at plus 10 mils is still pretty solid. It's not the best I've seen. It definitely looks a little bit more milky and cloudy than some other scopes, even inside this price point, some that we'll be taking a look at very soon. But ultimately, it's still pretty usable. I'm not going to say it's the most usable, but I think 1,000 yards, especially in conditions that aren't perfect, is going to be pushing this optic a little bit. If you feel like you might be taking shots at that distance or even further, I would highly recommend probably looking at something, unfortunately, significantly more expensive than this. But ultimately, if you might be pushing out that far once in a while, I think this would probably be fine for you. Looking out at the horizon at around 2,000 yards, we're going to shift the camera side by side to get a real quick idea of the image stability in Eyebox. And the image stability on this thing is actually really, really good. At 35x, the reticle and the targets down range stay really sharp and clear to one another until you can't look through the scope anymore. It's a little bit on the tighter side, but again, we are at 35 and now 30x. Those are pretty large numbers, but yet going side to side on this thing, it still looks relatively good no matter how far you out, while you can still manage to look through it, if that makes any sense. It's good. It's really good. And the lower you get, the better it gets. The end user experience of this scope with the Eyebox and image stability goes is extremely good. It's very satisfying scope to get behind and use. And you don't have to take my word for it. See for yourself. At 7x, the way that the illumination stays visible all the way to the outside edge and even just a touch beyond is incredibly good for a first focal plane optic, let alone a high-powered variable optic like this. It's really wonderful. Now, sure, as you get up to the higher magnifications, we're at about 20-25x here. We're about to look at 30x. Once we get to 30, it starts getting pretty dang tight. But if you have a good solid cheek weld on a more precision rifle, it shouldn't be as bad. Again, we are looking at a very shadowy area, so we are going to have a little bit more of a darkening to the image. But beyond that, it's still pretty solid. Getting right into the side-by-side comparisons, again, I went very in-depth between this DNT and the EP5 from Arken. So if you want to watch more about that, go watch the video linked down below. But to give you a real quick synapse or a rundown between these two. On paper, the Arken's a little bit cheaper. They're the exact same length, 16 inches. They're the exact same weight at 42 ounces. They have the exact same field of view, 16.6 to 3.3. The exact same eye relief at 3.5. And the exact same minimum parallax of 25 yards. However, the EP5 claims 32 mils of elevation as opposed to the DNT's 30. That's the only real difference on paper that these two scopes have, other than the price point. Now, which one would I personally choose? If I had to go between these, I would go with the DNT. I like the reticle. I like the illumination. I like a couple of the modifications that DNT made to the overall base optic over the EP5 from Arken. And yeah, I think it's worth the price premium. I think the last difference I saw when I wrote down all my notes was about $70 more expensive for the DNT. I would happily spend that just to get the illumination and the reticle out of the One versus the EP5. If you're looking to get the cheapest one possible, well, it might go to the Arken only because they run some pretty aggressive sales every once in a while. And I don't think DNT really does that. As far as other scope offerings, Arken does offer far more optics than the DNT. I can't say anything further than that, but maybe we'll just have to wait and see. So between these two, I'm going to take the DNT reticle. All the other controls are about the same. Some I prefer on the Arken, some I prefer on the DNT, so that's a wash. Reticles, I definitely the DNT. Illumination, DNT. I will say that the colors are a little bit different between these two. The DNT is a little bit warmer than the Arken, which is a little bit cooler. Personal preference aside, is it really that noticeable if you had one and then the other like a week or two later? Probably not. But side by side, you absolutely notice it. So if you're, more keen to having a cooler looking scope, then go with the Arken, or a warmer looking scope as far as glass goes, go with the DNT. And that's about it. This next comparison is going to probably be the DNT's and the Arken's biggest rival. It's going to be the Bushnell Match Pro ED, or the MPED for short. Now it's true, the MPED is only a 5-30 as opposed to the DNT's 7-35, but price point, they're actually very similar. I've actually seen the Bushnells go for less than what the DNTs have gone for. Lengthwise, the MPED's about a ½ inch shorter. It's 10 ounces lighter, and because the magnification difference, your field of view is 24.5 to 4.1 versus 16.6 to 3.3. Eye relief is going to be in favor of the MPED, a whole 3.8 inches versus 3.5. It also has a much closer minimum side parallax of 15 yards. So if that's something that's important to you, then those 10 extra yards will make a huge difference. As far as the elevation gain capacity, they're both the same at 30 mils of elevation. Now, if you like the MPED but don't like this Mil Deploy 2 reticle, fear not, they have released a new reticle. This new G5 reticle looks like it's the best of both worlds from the previous generation Bushnell products with their G2s and G3s, and the Deploy, and bring them all sort of together to make this, quite frankly, very interesting and good-looking reticle. I would love to try one of these out. Reticle choices aside, optically, it's the MPED. Controls-wise, it's the MPED. It has little things about it that just make it a little bit more enjoyable to use, like a little cattail that's included on the magnification ring. It comes with a really nice tool for adjusting literally every aspect of the optic. It also has locking turrets, which for someone like myself is a really nice feature. If you're shooting more precision, though, you might not even like locking turrets because they'll get in the way. It's one less thing you have to worry about as far as if you have to unlock it before making an adjustment, and I totally get it. Optically, the MPED is very impressive. When I filmed with this, I had not been as sharp as I am now, so things aren't as clear as I know that they could have been and probably even should have been. But the MPED is just a better, nicer package and can be had for about the same price. So which one of these would I personally choose? It's going to be the Bushnell. I really enjoyed the MPED 5-30 a lot, so much so I bought the 3-18. But the 3-18 is not as good as the 5-30, so I'm going to be selling it. Do I need a 5-30? No, but if I did, it would be the MPED. Now I will say that despite the fact that the MPED does at least have locking turrets, it's still nicer to adjust the ones than the DNT. The illumination is also better on the DNT, and maybe at the maximum sharpness at the center, the DNT is even keel with the Bushnell, if not a touch ahead. If you're going for more precision, though, I think the DNT might actually be a touch better. Or if you're looking for a scope that's a little bit heavier to mitigate recoil. A lot of things to take into consideration. My last comparison is going to be with a scope that I can say is optically flawless, the Meopta Optica 6 5-30. Now, as far as this optic goes against the DNT, on paper, the Optica is going to be more expensive, about $200 to $300 more expensive. It's going to be shorter by about a ½ inch. It's going to be lighter by about 6.5 ounces. Again, because the magnification difference, we have a field of view discrepancy, so 24.6 to 3.7 feet versus 16.6 to 3.3. But again, at the top end, it's not as big of a difference as what we saw with the MPED, primarily because the view through the Optica is much smaller than the MPED. And as you can see, it is smaller than the DNT. As far as these two side by side for maximum sharpness, clarity, and crispness, there's no comparison. The Optica is vastly superior. The Optica is so good that I want to justify buying one, but I just haven't been able to do so. If it had a capped windage or a locking windage turret to match the elevation turret, I'd own one. But having a zero stop locking elevation and a completely uncapped and nothing all windage, just it honestly frustrates me. Field of view, we already talked about. Eye relief, the Optica is 3.9 inches versus the DNT's 3.5. That is also going to play into the role of why the Optica is smaller to look through. We're technically just a lot farther away from it, but that was how the Optica was designed. And the result of that, the level of eye relief for this magnification, I feel results in the optic being as sharp and as clear as it is. Just look at these two at 180 yards. Granted, they were filmed on completely different days, but the Optica just has the edge. It's got so much more detail in all those little components. The DNT is still quite good, but compared to the Optica 6, the Optica just wins just from raw performance alone. Even when we push back a little bit further to exactly 200 yards from 180, there's just a lot more information with what we see with the Optica. Man, is it really nice. So if you're buying the DNT and you wanted to use it for precision, as good as the scope is, at the maximum, it does give you a slightly softer image. Here at 300 yards, as good as the DNT looks, the Optica is just better, even though it has less magnification. Yes, there is a 5x discrepancy, but is that enough to sway the slightly softer looking image of the DNT for something like the Optica? I don't really think so. I'd rather have less magnification, but a much sharper image than vice versa. If you're between the DNT, would you be willing to spend the extra $300 or so to get into the Meopta? That's entirely up to you. But if you're looking for best possible optics and performance for the price, you cannot exclude the Optica 6. And that's it, ladies and gentlemen. Short, sweet, and to the point. DNT did send this optic in for me to review and to keep. No, I'm not going to bias myself to say that the optic is better than how I found it to be, just because they did that. And they knew that full well when I said, you could send me whatever you want, but I'm going to be honest with it. But honestly speaking, it's a fairly good optic. But I feel that it's in a very, very competitive price point. We only looked at a couple of scopes that are around the same price point. There's a plethora of different high-powered variable optics in the $600 to like $800 range that could probably give this thing a run for its money. So it has to be absolutely perfect if it's going to get a full-blown recommendation. Things like the tracking, the reticle, the illumination, and the controls are really, really solid. It feels good in hand, but it doesn't feel like it's made out of the best possible materials. But I suspect that if it was made out of better materials, it would cost well north of $1,000. Would that really make a difference for a lot of people? I highly doubt it. The only real shortcoming is the optical performance above 25 to 30x. To 25 and 30, in bright, clear conditions, it's pretty damn impressive. But beyond that, or in lower light environments, the glass really shows its limitations. Inherently, it might not sound good on paper, but it might not make that much of a difference to you if you're not going to be out there shooting in lower light environments, on a hunt, let's say, in very congested areas like, a forest. Or if you think that you might only be using the max magnification seldomly, or at very close ranges, or from a very stable position, like shooting F-class matches. I have a lot of friends that shoot 50-yard, 22 LR F-class matches, and several of them run the DNT. because it doesn't matter to them that the outside edge gets a little bit darker. It doesn't matter that it's heavy. They're shooting precision for groups. And if they're making an adjustment to the windage or the elevation, just like you saw with this scope, well, it tracks flawlessly. Now, I can't say that across every single one of these scopes that's ever been produced. This is a serving size of 1. But if the rest of the scopes out there can correlate themselves 90-95% to this scope, I'd be quite impressed with those figures. For the money, I think it's a pretty good optic. It's definitely in a very competitive segment. So if you're on the fence with this, definitely do your homework and just try to find what's going to be best suited for you. There might be an optic that's not as good in one area, but it's better suited for your overall situation and your use case for this optic. And go with that. Don't go with what's better on paper. Go with what's going to fit your role better. And if this scope fits your role well enough where you're going to give it a shot, I think you'll be very pleased. With all that being said, a huge thank you for DNT for sending this in. I really do appreciate it. I think it's a fantastic first little optic for them to bring out to market, and hopefully in the very near future, they'll bring out some modifications to this optic and or different platforms. So on that note, thank you all very much for watching. And as always, I'll see you again next time. And a huge thank you to my Patreon providers and my Subscribe Star subscribers. Without you, this truly wouldn't be possible. If you'd like to support my channel but don't want to join either of those, I completely understand. But you can still help by using my affiliate links in the description below and or like, share, and subscribe as always. Again, thank you very much.